I first got interested in bighorn by listening to a ranger talk when I was 11 years old. I think the idea that a large mammal could survive in such a harsh environment really piqued my interest. It seemed to me to be a real symbol of true wilderness. Every time I asked questions as a kid about how many there were, or how they survived, or what they ate, what kinds of problems they might have faced, there didn't seem to be a lot of information. Prior to the mid-1800s, there were probably maybe a couple thousand desert bighorns in the area that we now know of as Borrego. And by the 1960s or 70s, they were down to about 400 animals.
And during the 90s, their population did go down quite a bit. And then in 1998, they were federally listed as an endangered species. So we need to continue to monitor these sheep so that we can hopefully find out what is causing the problems.
Many of today's highways follow the historic routes into California, and indeed many highways were built on top of desert water sources. The long mountain range that they live in here in Southern California has been bisected by highways, and there are towns nearby which have grown quite a bit, right up into their habitat. So their habitat is now fragmented into islands.
And this is areas that sheep need to survive in order to obtain water, to get good forage. And so right now we're losing ground. We need to gain it back.
And if we can establish these and close the gaps in that 600,000+ acres, that's even more habitat for the sheep to be able to get away from man and do what bighorn sheep have been doing for centuries, unencumbered by human beings other than the lone hiker that might come through and stand in awe at them doing what the wild does.
The desert bighorn is a supremely adapted desert animal. They feel most at home when they can be up in the steep rock looking down on danger, down on predators, or looking down on humans. Many of these bighorn sheep set up an area as far from predators as possible. So for about 7 months, say between October and April, they are getting by without taking a drink of free water. They get the moisture they need from the vegetation. A large ram in the summertime, we think, can go for maybe 3 to 5 days without a drink of water. You and I go without water, we could die in a few hours. Our bodies are not adapted to dehydration and a spike in our body temperature like bighorn sheep are adapted. We monitor sheep here in the park many different ways. The easiest is using radio collars. So we get a reading on these animals, and we know what areas are very critical for them to survive.
Most of the radio collars that we place are on females, because females are the ones that are ultimately going to increase the population. I have a group of radio collared ewes that I've been tracking for the last 3 years, and I've been keeping very close tabs on their movements. And I monitor when they have their lambs, and then I watch the lambs as they progress through the months. If you look on the slopes, they're really hard to see. They're real cryptic. And even with radio collars on, I still have a hard time finding them.
Once you find your first sheep, that's the hardest one. They blend in very, very well with the environment. And until that rock moves, you're just looking at a rock.
Once I saw that first one, I said, aha, that's how big they look, that's what color they are. And now I see bighorn very frequently.
I really think that it would be nice if someday they don't have this job anymore, that we'll have enough habitat and areas set aside for them that we won't need to manage them any longer. And that I can just come out here and just watch the sheep for the fun of it.
And I would say the desert bighorn sheep is a good news story. that it has come back, that we as a people are recognizing that it needs our attention. It can't survive if we just ignore it and go about our way building highways and canals and golf courses in their habitat. We really have to put them up there as a point of consideration. And I think it's an excellent success story. And you know, a measure of that would be that our children and our grandchildren, 20, 30, 50 years from now, will be able to come to a place like Anza Borrego and have that same exhilaration in the backcountry of seeing a bighorn sheep silhouetted up on the top of a ridge.